Hello everybody and welcome to another exciting, fun-filled episode of Radiorama, where I show you how to work on primarily radios, tube-based electronics, stereo systems, that kind of thing. And today we have a 1952 Westinghouse model H-374T5. I'm assuming maroon because it's clearly not ivory. It's pretty grubby. It's definitely been around the block a lot. We've got a dial that someone was very nice to put paint on. It's a clock radio. The back has kind of been torn here. I'll have to add more to this. This is the antenna. It is filthy. Yeah, it looks like it has been sitting in someone's basement for who knows how long. It is completely filthy. Don't know what the working condition is. Let's go ahead and first of all see if the clock still works. This is a Telecron movement. They are generally pretty reliable. I've got a bunch in my house that keep perfectly good accurate time. And the movement is still working. In fact, I don't hear anything. It's very quiet. That means the rotor hasn't seized up and it's still moving smoothly. Let's go ahead and see if we got life. These tubes are so dirty I can't even tell if they're coming on. I see a little bit on that rectifier tube. It is coming up. It is coming up.
As the California Department of Public Health mulls over whether to cancel elective surgery statewide.
Well, it kind of works, albeit poorly. It sounds like I'm actually surprised it still works. Usually by this time, the electrolytics are shot. So either they've been replaced or this is one of the lucky few that still works. I've actually, after moving to California, I found for some reason that a lot of these sets they continue working. Where I'm from originally, it gets very humid and hot, and I think that does a number on the electronics. Here it's pretty mild and dry. Let's see what we got going on for tubes here. It doesn't look like anything to write home about. We have a 35W4 for the rectifier, 50C5 for the output. We have our triode here, the 12AV6, and then our also typical 12BE6 and 12BA6. Just a very conventional, no frills AA5, or what is also referred to as a all-American 5-tube set. It looks like that what I'm hoping is that this all comes out in one piece, and it's not. I don't know. I've seen this clock bezel before. I get a feeling the clock has to come out this way. But we'll find out. I'm going to go ahead and take it apart. It looks to me that probably, yep, there's a couple screws in the bottom that holds the chassis in. Just two. That's not much. It is filthy. Anyway, let's get this guy apart and see what's going on under the hood. Okay, well, this is most of it removed. It's got one of the clockwork mechanisms that are installed in a really annoying way. The clock has to come out through the front, meaning it's wired underneath. How aggravating. Some of the nicer sets, they'd have a plug so you could actually unplug this, but not on this. Westinghouse seemed to be one of those brands that would take things kind of the cheap way out. The chassis has a bottom cover, and that's held in. It's got little crimped tabs here, which is also kind of aggravating and annoying. I'm assuming there's probably one on the other side. Yep, there is. I guess this huge thing comes off. It's stuck on there pretty good. I don't want to pry it off and break it. But I'm going to have to take... They didn't give me much wire here either. Sometimes what you can do is you can just cut these wires, then wire nut them back in, but I don't know if I want to do that. Let me see if there's any way the clock's going to come out through the back. I don't think it's going to. GE used this same movement, and they were always clipped in the front to go out to the go in through the front. All right, well, I got the radio apart, and this is a weird one for me. Maybe it's because it's an earlier polystyrene set and they hadn't quite figured out the molding process yet, but this comes out. That's like clipped in there. It's held in there with these little friction clip things. I should probably put those over here so I don't lose them. In fact, putting there several of them. I think I dropped them on the floor too. Oh well, we'll find out later. Anyway, so here's the clock. It came, and indeed it comes out of the front. There's its back aluminum cover. Then I pulled this off. This is the giant tuning hamster wheel, whatever you. And it looks like this is all the factory original. Nothing's been replaced in it. We have the original electrolytic capacitor. It's amazing this still works because these guys, they get squished in that clip there. And that has the effect of just squeezing all of the layers together real tight, which is what you don't want. This is the across the line cap, and we can see they thought back then if they stuck paper caps inside of Bakelite housings they'd last longer, but I've seen so many easily that have blasted open. This guy's been hit probably by lightning or a surge. This is the also important grounding cap, this .05 rated cap. That's going to chassis ground. We'll need to replace that with a safety cap. And I desoldered all of the wires from the clock. Again, this is kind of a pain, but I marked which wire goes where. Red, black, white, and my own like sloppy writing. Doesn't matter as long as I know how to read it. So there's not much going on in this guy. We have a grand total of 4 paper caps and 2 electrolytics, and they're not that crazy. There's 2 50 microfarad caps inside. The black is our common negative. And where does the negative go? The negative goes all the way away. Where does it go? Here. Comes off of one end of the coffee pot percolator thingamabob here. So what I might do is run both negative ends of the electrolytics here. I don't know. I'm talking to myself. What is it the easier? So either you can put your positives individually where the positives go, you just trace where the original wires go, and then run your negatives to both, which I might do, or you can put both negatives down here. It's a 12 AV6 on top of that. That tube does not get that hot. If it was underneath the rectifier, I may not do it, may not have done it, because then you get a lot of heat you're dealing with it. But this is on the cooler side of the chassis. So we'll see. Anyway, there's 2 electrolytic capacitors there. And that big giant fat fella is going to be replaced by 2 of these teeny weeny little guys, thanks to modern electronics. Not such a huge thing. I am going to take it out and dust it off though. I feel like I'm going to make myself sneeze to death with all this dust bunnies and stuff that is accumulated all over the top of the chassis here. Okay, so we have the 2 electrolytics and the all-important 2 ground chassis cap, X2Y2 across the line cap. And without the clock, I of course have to compensate for the lack of a switch, so I've jumpered the switch together. Let's give it a test, running it through my isolation transformer. Okay, yeah, I definitely see filament going on there. Could potentially be a better improvement in reception.
Amy G for my friend at the desk.
Last we spoke, you were tracking some thick traffic on the tires.
0.9%. So Carrollton Auto Body collision cam's been pretty much parked there. Now, San Pablo's a trouble spot. We got a crash westbound 80 before San Pablo Dam Road. The 2 left lanes are blocked there. So
I think I'll take it. It definitely does not like my isolation transformer, hence the obnoxious buzz. Only got 2 more caps to replace here, then it'll be probably good to go, except for maybe some cleaning of the pot. I'm going to check the IF and RF transformers, see if we can tweak those up a little bit. Most of this is going to be about cleaning the grubbiness overall of it, because it's a little rough. And I also need to kind of add a new piece for this back so it fits more firmly. Let's get thrown in the garbage. So what do we have here? We have a 0.01 cap and a 0.05 cap. Fair enough. Let's just replace those 2 and finish up the recap job, and then we'll do some overall other small, slight maintenance-y type tasks. Okay, so the set is effectively recapped. The last thing I do before I give it a final test is I'm going to spray my volume pot. A little cleaner. At this point I'm using WD-40 because I ran out of contact cleaner, and yes, it works just fine. Alright, so still got it plugged up to my isolation transformer. Let's go ahead and give her a rip. Whoa! I just saw a little bit of a spark there. What's going on here? Oh dear, I'm glad that I stopped that. You see that? Well, I guess you can't because I had the camera shied away. That pin, I bent it over accidentally, and it was touching this other pin. Alright. Repeat day. Let's try this again. Hopefully I didn't fry any of the... Uh-oh. I don't see any tube filament. I wonder if I fried something just now. Either that or one of my tubes just came loose from the socket. Let me flip it right side up and see if I can wiggle everything back together. I have to admit I'm dumbfounded about what's going on here. Maybe it's just something stupid I did, but I'm going to start doing some troubleshooting. Because I essentially have zilch power, no B plus or anything. Well, the problem was embarrassingly stupid. I've had this tendency of taking bad tubes and sticking them back in my good tube drawers even though they're bad. This 35W4 was actually bad. And so I stuck another one in it.
Forecast through the beginning of next week. Slightly above average temperatures in store for us by Tuesday afternoon. We're going to start off with a mix of upper 30s and low 40s, which is normal for the middle of January. High temperatures by Tuesday afternoon, though, are going to warm up into the low 60s for San Francisco and Oakland. Around 60 degrees for inland parts of the East Bay.
I'll take it. That sounds like pleasant weather. Anyway, the good news is that the set seems to be alive and healthy. I think that's all the electronic work I'm going to do for this evening, other than maybe take this over and clean this up in the sink because it's filthy. It'd actually be easier to clean since I can take it apart in several pieces. But we're off to a good start, and so I'm pretty happy with how this is going, despite the weird hiccup. Alright, so I gave the cabinet a good cleaning upping. Seems like it's looking a little better. So now comes the fine fun of polishing everything up. And for that purpose, I have my oh-so-ever-mentioned Novus No. 2 plastic polish. I'm going to use it both on the plastic case, the little piece that's over there, as well as the clock face, which is also plastic, as well as this guy. I want to get this stupid paint splotches off of there. I'm assuming that probably what happened, these numbers started to fade, and the owner's like, well, that's my favorite station, so let's put nail polish on them. I'm not sure if that is actually what he sounded like, but I just like to think of it that way. So, this is oftentimes, for me, which takes more time than actually doing the electronics. So this is pretty rough. Got a little bit of heat damage here. There's a lot of scratches. Clearly it was heavily used, and whoever owned it didn't give a shit about it. They're just like, whatever. So, we'll need to spend a lot of time with this plastic polish. going over it, and this could take several hours. I usually do it at the end of the day when I'm done working on electronics, because it requires no focus or attention. Just sit and listen to my music, sip a beer, and plastic polish away. Alrighty, I think I'm going to wrap it up for the evening. This actually took about an hour and a half of polishing. It's not perfect. There's definitely some nicks and stuff in there, but this is much closer to what it looked like when it came out of the factory. I know maroon is not exactly the most popular color today, but I don't know. Sometimes I get these sets in that look like crap, and I'd actually have this more of an inkling of a desire to make them look as good as they possibly could in their original configuration. So maroon it is. You even have like a little bit of like a swirl there towards the bottom. Oh well. Tomorrow we will resume finishing this up. I think I'm going to add the infamous audio input that I've always mentioned. And also I need to make a back for this. Well, we need to replace the missing chunk so it fits in the back better. Alright, see you tomorrow. Welcome back to day number 2 of working on the Westinghouse. And this morning I got up bright and early and came out here and I glued this little panel back in with some super glue. This happens occasionally, it's not the end of the world, but I got a little bit of outgassing from the super glue here. I'll just have to polish that off. It's not a big deal, but it certainly looks better than it did yesterday when I was all scratched up. So today, I'm going to add the oh-so-famous audio input feature using an isolation transformer. I might mount the isolation transformer on top here. I don't know. There's not a lot of room under here. I typically don't want to put the isolation transformer too far away from the volume pot. But first, I need to make another back. Well, at least add to this back, because it's certainly not covering the entire back of the set. And so I need to scrounge around, see if I can find some pressboard or cardboard or something that'll work here. Alright, so here's the new back that I just got through making. All it is, I just cut out some cardboard, and this is double laminated now, so it's a little thicker. And just because I don't want there to be any more tearing to the back mount, I added this fender washer, and that just adds a little more structural integrity. And I also observed the original vent holes that were in the original back. It's important because these tubes will get quite warm, and you want to have a little bit of ventilation. I might even add a few more holes here and there, but it seems to fit pretty well. So it's not going to be like this totally jerry-rigged thing. Seems to cover up the back pretty well. Just needed to have a little bit cut out for the cord. And is it covering up the outlet? It is covering up the outlet a little bit. I don't think anyone's ever going to use that outlet anyway. Whatever, it's fine. So, what time is it now? I'm supposed to go pick up my bicycle. I think that's all I'm going to be able to do for today. Maybe tomorrow we'll resume with adding the audio input feature and wrap this bad boy up. Welcome back to day 3 of working on the Westinghouse clock radio, and I had to abruptly stop on the restoration because I went and got my old bicycle. I got new brake levers, new brakes front and back, new cables, so now I can actually stop, so it's great. Went out for a ride today, whole different experience. Last night before I went to bed, I actually did come out here and spend some more time polishing the case. I just figured, why not make it even nicer? Because, you know, a dark color is hard to make look decent because it just shows all the scratches. So I tried to remove as much of the scratching as I could. It's not perfect, but it's certainly better than it was. Now, the last thing I'm going to do before I reassemble it is I'm going to add the audio input feature, which allows you to run an audio device through the radio audio, well, the audio section of the set. And we're going to do that with a few components here. First of all, we need to make sure that it's done safely. And we do so by running the audio signal through a transformer. Now, I refer to these as isolation transformers because that's what they are electrically acting as. But all this is, now, if it's the same thing as a wall wart. You put 120 volts in, and 12 volts out. For you guys on the other side of the pond, it's probably 220 and same deal, 220 in. But it doesn't matter because this is going to be dealing with a tiny amount of current, if any at all. It's just a double downed over the top safety feature I had. So it has a primary and a secondary side. The primary side is the side that has the incoming high voltage, 120 volts, and then the outcoming secondary is 12 volts out. This is the primary, this is the secondary. Our primary is going to go to either ends of the volume pot. And we see here we have it. This is obviously the ground. We have a bottom of the pot, which is negative, and the top of the pot, which is the incoming IF signal from this IF transformer. This is pretty simple. Sometimes there's a lot of things connected to here. But what we're going to do is make sure, and first of all, before I get too carried away, I'm going to check to make sure that we are good on electrical current to chassis safety. I've got a rig over there that I use for doing my tests, because I want to make sure that I fix any of that before I proceed with this next step. But if it passes, which I think it will, because I don't see anything else going to chassis ground other than this one cap, then I will find a way to glue this transformer as close as I can to the volume pot. Maybe I can move a few things out of the way. Maybe I can relocate this. I think I'll do that. I can relocate this this cap here. I'm not sure if that solder is going to be able to be sanded down to be flat enough. And then we'll run our audio cable in. Now I buy these 6-foot audio cables. You don't need that much cable. I cut these in half. They're cheaper if you buy the longer lengths. And I buy them by the bulk as well. That runs in through the secondary side of the isolation transformer. And since there's a stereo cable here, we have a right and a left channel. You don't want to twist those two leads together. Instead, you want to separate them out. And what we do is we put right and left channel through a pair of resistors, and then we tie both ends together, and that goes on one side. Then the ground of the cable goes to the other. Now, the last thing we need to do, and this is just stuff that me and my friends have discovered over trial and error, is that oftentimes these sets have something called the automatic gain control, or automatic frequency control. Actually, it's not frequency. Sorry, that's a totally different thing. Automatic gain control, and that's in the radio section. We found that sometimes these transformers, even when you turn the signal off and on from the radio signal, this will interfere with that system. So we found if you put a 0.02 rated cap and a resistor that's half the value of the volume pot, that'll prevent that from happening. And lastly, we'll need to install a switch that disconnects this signal from the volume pot, so that when we run our audio through, it will be unimpeded. We won't have any radio signal interrupting the audio or interfering with it. Likewise, if someone decides they want to listen to the ball game, then they can flip the switch in the back and they can get pure AM radio once again. But before I get too carried away, I am going to take this over and do a test to make sure that our chassis is safe. All right, so now I have the set tested, well, not tested, hooked up to my test rig here, which is going to my multimeter. I've got it set on 2 volts AC. My max target range is 0.6 of a volt. And I have a polarity reversing switch. And this is a calibrated output of 250 milliamps. And I touched the chassis, and clearly that's the neutral side because that's barely registering anything. Let's flip it around. 0.33. So a little more than half of the max. So that's well below threshold. This chassis is safe and good to go. We can resume with the addition of the audio input feature. Do you hear this? Why do people buy such little yappy dogs like that? Sounds like a bunch of little rats nipping at each other. Anyway, I got distracted. So, looks like I'm going to mount a transformer right there. I'm going to move this painfully close capacitor out of the way a little bit, but I think it'll work just fine right there. All right, so I've got this new isolation transformer installed. This is a little easier to show off because it's a little more out in the open. But we have our secondary side of the transformer here. And our right and left channels are going through a pair of resistors that tie into one end. Here's the ground. Here is the top of the pot, which has the, I'm not sure if you can see it because it blends in, that little cap and that resistor, and that goes to the top of the pot. Here's a separated radio signal that was going to the top of the pot. Top of the pot. Sounds like a Dr. Seuss book or something. But anyway, we'll run a switch wire from there. And then the other side is the negative of the pot. So I've got a Bluetooth signal running through it right now. Radio's obviously not going to work, but we can at least test for the audio. Holy crap, you know, usually these radios sound like garbage. And I mean, I'm not saying I would take this to a high fidelity show or anything like that and brag about it, but for a little crappy little Westinghouse clock radio, it's not bad. Anyway, this is going to be a good, clean sounding set, I believe, because usually, like I said, you'll have like 2 or 3 things sometimes going to the top of the pot. And then you have to isolate all that crap before you put your switch in there. The other thing I do is I'll put a little dab of glue back here where the cord comes out the back. That way it won't chafe or wiggle or move around or anything like that. I just happened to find a convenient hole that was already there. And otherwise you have to drill one, which is hard because then you leave a lot of sharp edges that you need to file down. So before I seal it up, what I'm going to do is, well, add the switch wire and then glob some glue over that because, I don't know, if it ever comes loose, I don't want it to bang up against anything. Probably won't come loose. I've never had one of these pop off because that Gorilla Super Glue I use is strong. All right, I'll shut up and put those few things in there, and then we'll do a reassembly of the set. All right, well, now I remembered why when I first took this apart that I thought to myself, oh no, it's one of those stupid clock radios. It's a pain in the ass to reassemble. And I was right. And the reason is because it's a little tedious. And, you know, especially if you're just either polishing or painting a set, you want to scratch it all up. So this has got to go like through there. And then these 3 wires have to go through that hole. And then they're soldered into these 3 leads here. And then I have to put the bottom on. And then turn it around and shove it back in the case. And there's very little room to work once you get those wires out, because you only have like that much. So it's real tight. The other thing too is I find sometimes these, I don't know what it is, these clocks sometimes do not want to cooperate getting back in here. It's like a twist lock action. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes they're very fussy, and this one is no different. It's being really fussy with me. You know, I think what I'm going to do before I stick it back in the case, I mean, I know it's quiet and everything, but I think I'm just going to spray a little light machine oil on it, wring it out for a minute, and then we'll do the reassembly. That'll just ensure that it'll still run quiet and smoothly. All right, the clockwork mechanism is cleaned out. I've been letting it drain here. Sure, it'd be real tempting to go out and spray it all over the yard to kill the weeds, but that's not very environmentally friendly. So it's time to reassemble. Unfortunately, well, you know what? I would do something different. A lot of people say that I should film more with the camera attachment. Let's try this. You get to watch me being really, really frustrated putting this through. All right, here we go. I'm not sure how this is going to look on film, but maybe you'll get the idea of what I'm trying to do. First thing I need to do is orient 12 o'clock. This is the top of the clock. And we're going to put it wires first. Sometimes you just kind of have to mess around with these guys. Sometimes you get jammed up on stuff, which is really aggravating. But sometimes you just got to feel around a little bit, maybe try different corners. Almost got, oh, there we go. So that, there we go. All right, this one's going to be a pain in the ass, but anyway, once you get it seated like that, Then what you need to do is put your back plate that cinches it to the inside of the cabinet. Looks like that. There's like 3 little nuts that attach to 3 little stakes that come off the back of this clock. So, how does that work? I'm not going to be able to do this one hand. I have to use both hands, unfortunately. Let's see. Yeah, you get what I mean? Ugh. Then you orient the pattern, the bolt pattern in the back here. I'm not sure. What are you guys seeing here? Okay. These wires are going to come up through, I think, no, they got to come in through here, or out through here. Or out through there. Shit, I should have remembered. I think it's out of the top. So, gotta run the white, the red. God. I don't know how they did this at the factory. This is ridiculous. Alright, you know what? I'm not going to film all this. This is ridiculous. You guys will be sitting there for 10 minutes watching me swear at myself. So anyway, you get the idea. Alright, well that was kind of a pain. I couldn't get the wires through. I found out that 2 of the wires that were in there originally were just so stiff that they were unmovable. And I figured maybe it's not a good idea to have such obviously hardened up insulation wiring anyway. So that's the old stuff. I put in 2 new wires. The red one's still pretty flexible and good. So now what needs to happen is I'm going to have to run these through this hole. And I've got a little keeper here too. And then we'll stick the bottom back on and hopefully stick the clock back together. Well, the radio back together rather. Okay, so she is now done. I've got it all put back together again. And I've been having it playing here for maybe about an hour. And anyway, got the little Bluetoothy thing running through here. Sounding pretty good.
Shut up and keep hope alive. So don't walk away. Don't walk away. Don't you walk away. I'm talking to you. Don't walk away. Don't walk away.
Pretty nice sounding little set. I do so say myself. Anyway, been burning the midnight oil on this one. Had a few more issues with the clock, and I finally got it all put back together again. But it seems to be in good working order, and so I think it's done. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. As always, if you like what you see, please press that like button. If you have any questions or comments for me, feel free to leave them in the space below, and I'll try to get to them. And until the next time a radio comes across my workbench, I'll see you guys next time. Adios.